Hello there. Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app, a reminder, free to download, free to use at all times. And it is sponsored by Diversus Health Mental Health and well-being. For all a veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I'd love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Couple guests on the show, very excited about both of them. Jim Murphy, who wrote the book Inner Excellence. You may recall A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles was reading it on the sideline during a playoff game. That must mean it's pretty good, and I can certainly vouch for it, having read it. It is very good. I'm going to get Jim on in the next segment to talk a little bit about it. Hour two, I'll be joined by comedian Dusty Slay, who will be in town this Saturday at the Pikes Peak Center on his night shift tour. So looking forward to the guests, looking forward to you being my guest as well. Obviously, we're going to start with the Avalanche. And look, you know this, in the playoffs, it can happen that quick. That quick. The idea of momentum, game to game, it's not a thing. Every game is its own entity, its own organism. And just because you put together a performance like the Avalanche did in Game 4, there is no guarantee you're going to do that again in Game 5. Game 4, it looked like the Avalanche were going to finish this thing off in short order. Dallas was a step slow. Jake Ottinger, despite really a heroic effort, could not stop the Avalanche from lighting up the scoreboard. Gabriel Landeskog, just the Mackenzie Blackwood pitching a shutout, all that kind of stuff. The Avalanche looked borderline unstoppable. And it got you thinking about what was to come beyond this Dallas Stars series. And now, just a couple of days later, it's a very different feeling. But we have to look at this and say, no matter how you felt 9 seconds into the game, certainly looking back, you go, yeah, that was probably a bad sign. That 9 seconds in, I was listening to the broadcast here on Extra Sports 1300. Connor McGahey didn't even get done with his preamble that he normally does at the beginning of the game. You know, setting the stage. He wasn't even through that, and Wyatt Johnson had the Dallas Stars on the board. That was a bad sign. Now, a lot went against them. Pretty much everything went against them. It was just one of those nights where they were pushing uphill against everything. The officiating, have to talk about that, awful. The officiating was awful last night. And it benefited Dallas greatly. Did you see Rope Hintz just take his stick and hit Nathan McKinnon in the back of the head with it? I saw it. Referees apparently did not. But they did see Jamie Benn take his face and intentionally run it into the stick of Josh Manson when Josh Manson wasn't even engaging him. So there were calls. I think Gabriel Landeskog called them preseason calls that went for Dallas in that game. And that's certainly part of the conversation. The bounces, the puck luck wasn't there for the Colorado Avalanche. Just all of these extra variables. Nothing broke the Avalanche way all night. But you've watched sports enough and you've watched hockey enough to know that usually those things benefit the better team. Usually those other forces, if you will, in the game of hockey seem to kind of fit in with how the game flow is going, right? The better team seems to get more calls. The better team seems to get the puck luck more often than not. And the Avalanche, quite frankly, were not the better team. Not by a long shot. So I could say that there were things out of the Avs' control that were going against them. But the most important thing last night was certainly well within their control, and that's how they played. And they played a poor hockey game in a game that they couldn't. Last night was too big of a game to have that kind of a performance. And yes, the other things stacked on top of it. They didn't match the desperation of Dallas, and they didn't match the pace of Dallas. It was the Avs, and PK Subban pointed out perfectly on ESPN. The Avs looked a step slow. How many times do we talk about the Avs looking slow? They never look slow. They were last night. And even then, there was a glimmer of hope in that second period, right? Dallas is up 3-0, nothing going the Avs' way. All of a sudden, bang, bang, it's a one-goal game. To even do that against Jake Ottinger is an accomplishment in and of itself. And you're thinking, all right, now I only got to get one. And then it's a brand new game. And then what happens almost immediately after? Sam Malinsky, young player. You know, we've been so impressed with Mackenzie Blackwood in his first games in the playoffs. These are Sam Malinsky's too. And I don't think he's afforded himself quite as well as Mackenzie Blackwood has. Takes a penalty you can't take. You can call it a borderline call. You had watched enough of the game to know that was going to be called. He raised his elbow up. You can't take that penalty. You have all the momentum. You have been able to, in rapid succession, beat Jake Ottinger twice to get yourself right back in the game. You can't do anything that can even be misconstrued as a penalty. You can't take that penalty. And it deflated the Colorado Avalanche. It was basically a wrap right then and there. You didn't need the goals from Dallas after that to know the game was over. That was the moment. Any chance that the Avs had to come back in that game was done the minute Sam Malinsky went to the penalty box. Can't take that penalty. Can't do it. Coming back, and then, of course, Dallas makes a 3-goal game again. And to even get within one of Jake Ottinger, as I said, that's rare. To try and mount a comeback again from 3 goals down, it was just never going to happen. And it never did. And we have to be fair here. Apply the same energy. Right? How did you perceive Pete DeBoer pulling Jake Ottinger in the third? Waving the white flag? That's exactly what Jared Bednar did in the third. That was it. He knew it. You knew it. Avs were not coming back in that game. They didn't deserve to come back in that game. But they just looked, I mean, we're talking game 5 here, and it looked like the Colorado Avalanche were so surprised by the desperation level of Dallas, the idea that they were going to try and draw penalties or get away with things like, hello, this is the Dallas Stars we're talking about. This is how they always play. You don't think Jamie Benn's going to put his face into a stick if he thinks that it's going to put an Avs player in the penalty box? Of course he is. They're going to dive. They're going to hit you when no one's looking. This is Dallas Stars. This is how they play. And it just looked like the Avs were completely unprepared for it. And I know the Wyatt Johnson goal, and that's an example of puck luck. That's fluky. That doesn't happen. But it put them even, maybe that's what it was. That kind of made all this other stuff happen, this domino effect. But it just looked like the Avs were on their heels. They weren't skating with the Dallas Stars. And they were falling into all the traps that the Dallas Stars lay out for their opponents in every single game. Some of last night was out of their control, but a lot of it wasn't. They didn't come nearly close enough to meeting the moment, and I wonder when they're going to. Because you look at some of these games, when are the Avs going to show that kind of killer instinct? Take control of this series. Like, it seems like after game one, like every game has kind of gone, the result anyway, has gone the way of the more desperate team. And a lot of that has been on Dallas, right? They dropped game one. They had to get desperate. But when are the Avs going to generate that? Because at some point you're going to have to. There is going to be a game. There already has been in this series, but let's say the Avs are fortunate enough to move on. There's going to be a game where the Avalanche are going to have to meet the moment. They can't just rely on, we get to go back home, or the next game we're going to be better because we're going to be the more desperate team. Championship teams are able to figure out a way to match their opponent in those games, even if it's a game. And last night was really important. So I can't say that the Avs could afford to lose that game, but it wasn't an elimination game, right? It was on the road. The Avs, one night after they completely dominated the Dallas Stars, they looked completely different. One game later. And with all that being said, that's not going to be the game that you look back on if the Avs lose this series and lament. Because as unfortunate as last night was, as surprising as last night was, those games can happen. And what they do is bring into focus any other game where maybe you were right. Maybe you did have everything going. Maybe all these other opposing forces weren't going against you and you didn't get the job done. And I'm going to continue to go back to game two. Go back to it now. I'll go back to it before game six. And if the Avs lose this series, I'm going to point right back to game two. That was one of those moments. The Avs didn't need that game. Dallas was the more desperate team. And yet, what happened? The Avalanche controlled that game for 40 minutes. They had Dallas against the ropes, and there's no way Dallas was going to rally from dropping the first two games of a series at home. There's no way. The Avalanche could have effectively ended the series just 2 games in. And what happened? They let go of the rope. Dallas came back. They left their chances to chance, the coin flip proposition that is overtime. That's the game that's going to continue to stick in Jared Bednar's craw. That's the one that if they lose this series, you'll go back and say how much different it could have been. It's not last night. Still disappointing. Still borderline shocking the way that they played, given how they played in game 4. But game 2 is going to be the one. That's going to be the one that is just going to eat at them. And it may, depending on how these last couple of games go, it may ultimately be not what cost them the series, but the turning point in the series. When the Avalanche could have had Dallas dead to rights and didn't finish the job. And then the rest of the series played out and they're on the wrong end. Not saying they are losing this series. And I feel like we're going to a game 7. But if they do lose this series, last night's going to be incredibly disappointing, but game 2 is going to be the one that we're talking about. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Jim Murphy, the author of Inner Excellence, terrific book. If you are an athlete, if you are a fan of athletes, trust me, it's right up your alley if you're looking to self-improve. Jim Murphy joins me next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. My first guest today wrote a book that is so good it has become required reading on NFL sidelines. The #1 New York Times bestseller, Inner Excellence, Train Your Mind for Extraordinary Performance and the Best Possible Life. My pleasure to be joined by Jim Murphy. Jim, pleasure. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure. So I'm sure you've been asked a million times about AJ Brown. I'm just curious as not just an author, but everything that you do to see your work showcased in that way, and I guess for lack of a better word, endorsed that way in such a public way. How does that feel for you?
Well, it's such a gift. The book has been out for 15 years and the latest version for almost 5 years. And so to have now emails coming in just about every day from all over North America saying the book changed their life, it's really surreal. And I'm just so grateful for God allowing this to happen, and for AJ Brown to being true to himself, and showing the world that we all have time to read, and that not to be afraid of something that you think will help you in your life, not to be afraid of what other people think.
Yeah, and it's so important, right? We talk about mental health and acknowledging that we can all be better. We can all work on, as I think it was Marshawn Lynch, working on your mentals and all that good stuff. But what I really enjoyed, and I read a lot of books in this space, what I enjoy about your book, and it's no surprise that AJ Brown is reading it, you really do speak to the athlete. And even if you're not an athlete, just a sports fan, we kind of operate our lives in that way because we watch so much sports that we take some of that mentality into our own lives. And in Inner Excellence, you really speak to these kind of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Inner Excellence is really for all of us. It's
right.
Not just for pro athletes, because we all, and in fact, a lot of people listening to the show may have it harder than AJ Brown as far as, they may be working 2 jobs and no off season, no coaches, no trainers, no massage therapists, and a lot more pressure. And so Inner Excellence is maybe even more important for the listeners.
But you do have a sports background. I'm curious, did you seek out, was there an inner excellence for you when you were coming up in the Cubs organization? Did you have these resources or books or whatever that you used to kind of help you in your professional sports career?
Well, there's a book that I carried around with me everywhere when I was starting, like 17 years old, and it was called The Mental Toughness Training for Sports by Dr. Jim Lehrer. And so that's kind of the book that launched me into sports psychology. I hadn't heard of anything about that before. And then my baseball coach, Larry Book, said, "Hey, Jim, read this book." And I was obsessed with being a superstar. So that really got me going.
And what was, after your professional baseball career came to an end, was this where you were always going to go? Did you have that in the back of your mind, or was there some self-searching that you needed to do to figure out what the next chapter of your life was going to look like?
Oh man, big time. I never thought about coaching. That was not even an interest of mine ever. My career was over, and I was devastated. My whole identity wrapped around my career. When I lost it, I felt like I lost everything. So what I ended up doing, I was driving a truck for FedEx, and then one day I decided to go to the desert and live a life of solitude to figure out what to do with my life, and to find something that I could devote my life to. And that's where I decided to become a personal coach to pro baseball players and teach them how to have peace and confidence under pressure, and spent 5 years in full-time writing and research that became the book Inner Excellence.
Jim Murphy, my guest, as he mentioned, the book Inner Excellence, the New York Times #1 New York Times bestseller, joining me here on Drive Time Sports. Part of your backstory too, and I keep, obviously this being a sports show, keep putting it through the lens of sports. But one thing I found especially interesting about kind of, I guess the impetus of a lot of your research and everything was Olympic athletes. And we here in Colorado Springs, we call ourselves Olympic City, USA. We have all these national governing bodies here. We run into a lot of Olympic athletes in the grocery store on a daily basis. So the Olympic movement is very near and dear to our hearts. But the Olympic athlete was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was kind of when you started a lot of your research that was the athlete that you were kind of most intrigued by.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I grew up watching the Olympics, love the Olympics, still do. And I just was kind of imagining who would have the most pressure as far as an athlete. And then I thought, I mean, training for 4 years for an event that may last less than a minute, how much more pressure is that? And so that's when I started to do the research. I called up the sports psychologist and said, how can an Olympic athlete train for 4 years for an event that lasts less than a minute and have peace and confidence in that situation?
And where did that kind of take you? Did you see at that moment that, you know what, maybe there's gaps or something here that maybe I can help with these kind of athletes, because we see them, and obviously so many of them, we remember the moments that they succeed and they have a medal around their neck. We don't remember some of the athletes that come up short. Did you really feel like, hey, I could really help the Olympic movement or these Olympic athletes? I could add something to what they're doing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, when I called up a sports psychologist and asked him that, it just brought more questions than answers. So I called another and another and another, and that's why I ended up spending five years of full time writing and research, because I wasn't getting the answers that I wanted. And so, now through that, I can tell you a couple of things that I learned. One is that the heart is the key to your life, your spirit, your will, the deepest part of you. It's where your goals and dreams are, your biggest fears are. We need to get to your heart and your subconscious, and clarify, what you want most, and really get to those dreams. And what are they really? And for me, I realized what I really wanted was to feel fully alive. And I think that's what every athlete, every person wants, is to feel fully alive. And they just have that vision. Oh, I think to get that fully alive life where I have the most amazing life is if I do A, B, or C, if I win Olympic gold, or if I get a promotion, or if I get this one job, or get 1 million followers. And that's what we think, okay, that's the life that I want to live, and that's going to be it. But we don't know if that's the best life for us. Mm. And so what I do with pro athletes and Olympic athletes, and then everyone else, is we pursue inner strength and deep contentment, joy, and confidence, independent of circumstance. So help them clarify the purpose of their life and what they want most. And we go directly forward, and then we let everything else be added to us.
And that's such a great point, because one of my big takeaways from the book, and it's a lesson that I personally need to keep learning over and over again, is how much we are actually in control of all of that, but also how much we ourselves impede our own progress, right? We always look at these outside factors and what's keeping us from doing it. And so often it's more us than anything else.
Oh yeah, for sure. So what I found in my research is that the biggest challenge that we all face is getting in our own way, specifically by the default human nature of self-centeredness. We're all self-centered. That's our default way of living. We all constantly thinking about ourselves. Everything that I think, say, and do is generally based on my opinion, my thoughts, my desires, my wounds, my fears, and I only see the world through my lens, and I can't see it from your lens. And so it's a self-centered life that I live, and it leads towards fear. And so inner excellence is a way of getting outside that self-centeredness as much as possible.
You write books. I would imagine, I know I don't write books, but I would imagine that you write it with an idea of an experience or something that you hope that maybe readers get out of it. Every experience is different, but I'm curious when you're writing this, what was the experience that you hoped readers would have when reading Inner Excellence?
Oh, I mean, I hope it changes their life, and that they use this book. They find this book as a manual that they'll refer to the rest of their life. I've just finished a Inner Excellence retreat in Tijuana this weekend. I'm in New York right now, but this weekend in Tijuana, and part of this, we built the house for our family in Tijuana, and we also did the Inner Excellence retreat, and we all clarified our life purpose and learned inner excellence principles. And I mean, I think probably every single person at the retreat would say it was a life-changing experience, and such a grateful thing that I was a part of.
Well, as somebody that has a habit of getting in his own way, I certainly now use inner excellence as that manual, and that's what I love so much too about the book, Jim, is that you can keep going back to it. You don't just read it once and like, okay, I've absorbed everything and now I'm ready to go. I mean, that's the ideal scenario, sure, but the number of times that I've gone back and read certain passages and things like that, it really is something that you can incorporate in your daily life to just kind of reaffirm some of the stuff that Jim mentions in this book. It's available right now. Inner Excellence, the #1 New York Times bestseller. Train your mind for extraordinary performance and the best possible life. Jim, it was a pleasure to get to talk to you. Congratulations on all the renewed success with your work, and I look forward to the next time you and I get a chat.
Thank you so much. I look forward to it too.
Yep. Thank you. That's Jim Murphy, the author of Inner Excellence. Both A.J. Brown and Ryan Kaufman approved. I'll let you decide on your own, in your own head, which endorsement you take to heart more, and don't share it with me because I'm trying to better myself through Inner Excellence. For the stream, I'm holding up the book. It is really good. And I know, Jim, I think it's more the way that I think than the way that Jim thinks. But so many of the books in this space, like they make mention of sports every once in a while, but this, again, this is really a book that has a lot of examples of, you know, athletes and that athlete mentality. And I think it spoke to me a little bit more than some of these other books, just because, you know, sports is my life. And you heard him talking, he's a former pro baseball player, you know, started down this path with Olympic athletes in his mind, worked with the Olympic movement. So, yeah, definitely highly recommend picking up Inner Excellence at fine bookstores in real life or online. 719-247-1313. I do want to get back into the Avs after this because Cale Makar got a well-deserved little nod from the NHL today. I'll tell you what that is, but also gives me a reason to bring up Cale Makar. Where's he been this series? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Colorado Springs Switchbacks back at Widener Field this Saturday, 6 p.m., taking on Phoenix Rising for Galactic Night. First 3,000 fans through the gates at 6 will get a Switchbacks light-up sword presented by Sunbelt Rentals. Then a Galactic-themed fireworks display to follow, hopefully a Switchbacks victory. Tickets are selling out. They're not sold out, but they're selling out. So move quickly. Switchbacksfc.com is where you go to get those. Today, the NHL continue to roll out their finalists for their postseason awards. Yesterday was the Vezina, which if only Mackenzie Blackwood would have joined the Avalanche in the offseason, perhaps he would be on this list. But a former Av, Darcy Kemper, was there with Vasilevsky and Connor Hellebuck. And then today was the Norris Trophy, and there should be no surprise who the nominees were. Quinn Hughes of Vancouver, Zach Werenski of Columbus, and of course, Cale Makar, who has now been nominated, been a finalist for the Norris Trophy for the league's best defenseman. 5 out of the 6 years he has been in the NHL. He needs to start winning these again. He won one super early, and you got the feeling of, oh, he's just going to continue to win these things. And then you look up and you're like, man, he hasn't won in like 4 years. I do think he wins. Broke Mike Green's record for goals by a defenseman this year, led defenseman in goals and assists. And I know that sounds weird to talk about, defensemen and points and stats, but let's be honest, that's mostly what defensemen are now. Like the stay at home, that's why Devon Taves is so valuable to the Colorado Avalanche, is there aren't a lot of guys like him, the true stay at home defensive defenseman. Quinn Hughes jumps into the rush. Zach Werenski's been nominated because he led Columbus in points this year. He was their best player. And Cale Makar this year, with his numbers in a world where Nathan McKinnon doesn't exist, he's the Avalanche's best player. And you could say the same thing. These defensemen now, and you can loop in some of the other best defensemen. It's not just 3 of them. There's a handful to a half dozen of them. They're all arguably their team's best player. And in order to be your team's best player, you got to score goals and you got to dish out apples. And all 3 of these guys, Hughes, Werenski, and Cale Makar, are mostly nominated because of their offensive abilities. It's just the way of the world in the NHL. And we've had this discussion before. I think Cale Makar defensively is in this weird limbo where he's not certainly one of the top defensive defensemen in the NHL. He's also not asked to be because he plays with Devon Taves. But I do still think that he gets a little bit underrated when it comes to what he does defensively. It's not the best aspect of his game. He's not the best at that, but he defends. And he produces like a winger. And whether he wins this year or not, being a finalist for 5 of his 6 seasons in the NHL, he's the standard, right? And maybe you talk about him the way you talk about Nikola Jokic and the MVP, right? Like, Nikola Jokic probably isn't going to win this year. And it's been made abundantly clear that voters are definitely not going to keep naming one player the MVP every year. But we can acknowledge that in terms of what is an MVP, Jokic is the gold standard of that. So you can give the award to other people if you want to reward them for an outstanding individual season. But even many of the people who are saying, I'm voting for Shea, are still saying, well, Jokic is the best. He's the standard. Cale Makar has become the standard for defensemen in the NHL, whether he wins the Norris Trophy on a year-to-year basis or doesn't. He's the player who all other defensemen are measured against. And that's what being a finalist for this award gets you in 5 of the last 6 years. But where's he been this series? It's a regular season award, right? So we can leave the Norris Trophy conversation there and pick up the playoff conversation. Cale Makar still looking for his first goal of this series. And given that he is nominated or a finalist for the Norris Trophy largely because of his offensive exploits, this is troubling. Jared Bednar, never one to panic, talking about Cale Makar and not being that involved with the scoring so far in this series.
I think he had a little bit of a rough start to the series, but he was absolutely outstanding at home. So, yeah, and we've had a few guys that have struggled in this building and played good at home. That's a bright spot going back to our building.
And that's kind of the bigger picture here. We started the show talking in the micro about last night and what went wrong last night for the Avalanche. And the short answer to that is everything. But the bigger picture here is we can't lose sight of the fact that Dallas is without Jason Robertson and Miro Heiskanen. So not only do the Avs have the two best players in the series, if both teams are fully healthy, the Avs still have the two best players in the series in Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar. But now the separation between who I guess turns out to be Dallas's best player without Robertson and Heiskanen, which is probably Mikko Rantanen, the divide grows a little bit. And then you could probably throw in another Av or two on the list of the best 5 players in this series. So Cale Makar not producing is probably the most troubling. But as Jared Bednar said, he's not the only one. You know, in game 4, when Valeri Nichushkin had that goal, you kind of wondered, is that what's going to get him going? And right now it's like, oh no, Matt Duchene just blew it defensively. Like, oh, that's why Val Nichushkin scored that goal. Where's Val Nichushkin been? I mean, even Gabriel Landeskog hasn't been able to help him along. He helped Brock Nelson in game 4. But even Brock Nelson was kind of a non-entity early on in this series. I think that's probably the source of the most frustration if you're an Avalanche fan. Like, where are the big boys? And the Avs have a lot of them. But as far as the list of their best players, there's only been one guy that, to me, night in and night out, has been productive for the Colorado Avalanche, and that's Nathan MacKinnon. Cale Makar hasn't made, in my mind, a big enough impact in this series. Brock Nelson, to be quite honestly the biggest acquisition by the Avalanche in the season as far as skaters go, he hasn't been impactful throughout this series. Val Nichushkin Right? That was supposed to be part of the key, right? Well, Val Nichushkin, he's not going to bail this year. They're going to have him the whole way, and what a huge boost that would be to the Colorado Avalanche. I'm not seeing it consistently from him. I wondered going into this series, would Dallas be the team, the Stanley Cup contender? At one point, the Stanley Cup favorite. Would they look every bit that without Jason Robertson and Miro Heiskanen? At times in this series, and certainly last night, you have to ask the question, do the Avs look like the one-time Stanley Cup favorites and perpetual Stanley Cup contenders? Because I think Dallas has a better excuse than the Avs do. I mean, spinning this forward to Game 6, and Jared Bednar kind of teased it there. They better have Val and Kale and Brock and the whole Marty Necas and Necas. Did they credit him for the goal, or was that tipped out front? Either way, Necas put the shot on goal. Like, the Avs were actually supposed to have kind of a big talent gap between them. If you're losing Robertson and Heiskanen against the Avs roster, that's why the Avs were the favorite in this series, despite being the lower seed. So last night is a part of it, but the bigger picture, if you zoom out a little bit, really, should we be talking about the Avs at this point facing elimination against a Dallas Stars team that is without arguably its two best players? And one of their three, and a lot of their other players too. And what makes this a little bit more confusing that the Avs are in the spot they're in, Wyatt Johnson didn't really make an impact till last night. Mikko Rantanen had some nice moments, but he didn't really do much of anything on the score sheet until last night. I kind of let all the games blur together a bit, and I go, why are the Avs facing elimination? They have more of the best players in this series. They have both probably going to be named the NHL's best player and the NHL's best defenseman. They might get both the Hart and the Norris Trophy. Mackenzie Blackwood has played terrific up until last night. How are the Avs down 3-2? I think, look, we always got to, walk a fine line. You don't want to take away too much credit from the opponent, because I think that Dallas has done some very good things. And Jake Ottinger is this, where Dallas is not, their failures are not on him. But is it just Jake Ottinger? Or do we have to look at this series as a whole and say the Avs are inflicting as much damage on themselves as Dallas is doing? And I don't think that's disrespecting Dallas. I think that's accurately pointing out what is going on here. The Avs let up in game 2. It cost them. Game 3, you could call it a coin flip. Game 4 looked like the ideal game. That's how it's supposed to look, right? And then last night was a mess. If this team was playing their best hockey, I'm not entirely sure this series wouldn't be over by now. And now the Avs got to win back-to-back games. And into what Jared Bednar said at the end there, that's all well and good, because I do feel like the Avs are going to go back to Ball Arena and they're going to take game 6 and then we're going to have a game 7. But those guys got to go back to Dallas. If Nichushkin and Makar and Brock Nelson are dependent on home ice, that's a problem. So now the thoughts in my head where, okay, if it all comes together and it looks like game 4 on Thursday, great. But what happens if they go back to Dallas? Because all the problems with some of these players have been in Dallas. I'll boil it down to this. The Avs aren't winning this series if Cale Makar doesn't have a goal. I'll just put that. There's a lot of other stuff, but there's no way the Avs are winning this series if Cale Makar does not have a goal. So let's see if he gets one here in a couple of nights in game 6. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Avs loss in game 5. Tonight, we have a game 5. See, this is how it's supposed to work. Not both in the same night, not having to wait multiple days for both series to play. It's supposed to be every other night. Avs Nuggets, Avs Nuggets. At least it's working out that way today. Because last night we have the Avs, tonight Clippers Nuggets in game 5, and the one player more than anybody else that absolutely must show up tonight. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Tuesday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Thanks for watching on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300. Coming up in less than 20 minutes, I will be joined by comedian Dusty Slay, who will be coming to our town on Saturday at the Pikes Peak Center on his night shift tour. Be the second time Dusty has joined me on the program. Looking forward to reconnecting with him. He's got a lot going on. It's kind of blowing up right now. So Dusty Slay coming up in less than 20 minutes. You could be my guest by calling or texting 719-247-1313 or tweeting at me at Gingerly Tweets. Avs last night fall in Game 5. The Nuggets have the same scenario tonight at home. And before we get any further, I want to acknowledge a very happy anniversary to one member of the Denver Nuggets.
Difference of 2 seconds, the game clock and the shot clock.
Worst case scenario, we're going to overtime.
Jokic a screen, Murray to try to break the tie.
No timeout by the Lakers. I gotta go.
James, a bump, a feed, a punch shot. No! Zeros on the clock. The Nuggets advance.
TNT on the call. 1 year ago today, Jamal Murray hit a shot with 4 seconds left that ultimately eliminated the Los Angeles Lakers. And I think you would have to probably acknowledge that that was the last true high you felt as a Nuggets fan. Everything after that has been a little bit difficult. Right? The Wolves series was really tough. There are a lot of down moments, obviously culminating in the blown lead in Game 7. This year hasn't been a ton of fun. Michael Malone, Calvin Booth getting fired. So who better to bring a similar feeling back to the folks at Ball Arena than Jamal Murray himself? To me, that's where it all starts tonight. History tells me that Jokic will be just fine, and watching him in Game 4, he was just fine. He was superlative. Any Jamal Murray. How about this? This is a little hard to figure. 2 best games from Jamal Murray this series, Nuggets have lost. In terms of his high-scoring games. Best, most efficient, highest scoring. Nuggets 0-2. And in 2 games where he's kind of struggled, the Nuggets have won both. That shouldn't be how it works. But I think the thing with Jamal Murray in the playoffs, the brilliance of playoff Jamal, is not necessarily putting up 30, 35 points. We've seen him do it before. We've seen him put up more, and it's been amazing to watch. But really, when you boil it down, the essence of playoff Jamal is hitting big shots like the one you just heard from the Lakers series last year. Jamal Murray is a player that can shift momentum one direction or another. Or if the Nuggets already have it going, he can sustain momentum. He's shown the ability late in games to win games, to put away teams. Haven't seen that Jamal Murray yet. Haven't seen those kind of shots. I think they're going to need some to win this series. I think they're going to need some tonight. Because same rules apply for the Denver Nuggets, maybe even more so than the Colorado Avalanche, given that Game 5 is in Denver. They need tonight. They need to win this game. And I don't see how they do that with Jamal Murray not having the impact with his scoring the way that he has in so many of the series he has played in. What he did all the way throughout the NBA title run. So, look, if Jamal Murray scores 35 or 40 tonight, I would bet that the Denver Nuggets win the game. But I'm not even necessarily looking at that. I'm just looking at, hey, Nuggets need a big shot to shift the momentum. Clippers get out to a big lead, or Clippers start to come back. Here's Jamal Murray putting his foot down with a big three-pointer. That's the impact I'm looking for tonight. We have memorable shots in this series already from Jokic, from Aaron Gordon, obviously, even from Russell Westbrook. I can't really recall too many Jamal Murray shots in this series. That's what I want. In the big moments, for it to be Jamal Murray who's knocking down the shot. That's how he and Jokic work together. Yeah, every once in a while, Jokic would be the one to make the shot, but more often than not, it's Jamal Murray. And I think the Nuggets need some of that tonight. And back to that game a year ago, not only did he hit that shot to ultimately win the game, he hit a go-ahead three a couple minutes prior to that, and earlier in the fourth quarter, he yammed on LeBron. He posterized LeBron James. Like, he had 3 huge baskets in that fourth quarter to ultimately close out the Los Angeles Lakers. The pivotal moments of this game, whenever they come up, whether it's early in the game, right before the half, when the Clippers get a big lead, when the Clippers are threatening to come back at the end of the game, there are a lot of different points throughout this game where you could say Nuggets could really use a big Jamal Murray bucket right here. I think he needs to bring those. And I think he'll get his chance. Because I think David Adelman might pull a full J.J. Redick in this game, given the circumstances and given how much the Denver Nuggets need this game. J.J. Redick came under some scrutiny for the fact that he did not rest a single Laker starter in the entire second half of their loss against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And David Adelman, when kind of asked about how much he's playing his starters, kind of defended J.J. Redick.
Yeah, it's hard, man. And I by the way, I see J.J. Redick getting killed for playing those guys. If they don't reverse that call and they win that game, did J.J. Redick make the right call? Yeah, like sometimes you go with your gut, man. And what I watched yesterday was the Lakers go up 12, 14 points because of what he did and the decision he made. So, yeah, you can't worry about what they're going to say afterwards, and it's tough. You know, our starting 5 has to be on the court the majority of the game, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that they get breaks and at the same time keep 3 or 4 guys in the court that can make plays.
And that's the issue there at the end, right? He has the right mindset. Got to give him a break in an ideal world, but when you don't have Russell Westbrook, you end up playing your bench a combined 26 minutes and they give you 4 points. David Adelman made the point on the offensive end. He's talking about the offensive end. I need contributions. And I don't even think that it's plural. Let's go for contribution. 26 combined minutes and you get 4 points. That's not a contribution. That's not multiple contributions. That's nothing. So I don't think, depth and all that kind of stuff, I think, becomes more important as the playoffs go on, because every weakness that you have gets magnified the deeper you go in the playoffs, right? The better teams that you face. I think right now, just a contribution, just the ability, I'm not even talking about the non-Jokic minutes. That's a lost cause. We got to be done with that. They're going to be terrible all the time when Nikola Jokic is off the floor. There's no move they can make to fix that. But how about being able to get by in any situation that not all 5 starters are in the game? Like, that should be possible. And it wasn't. And I think that maybe played into it a little bit on why LA was able to come back in that game. Because the bench wasn't contributing. And then when David Adelman made the call, he's like, you know what? I forget this. I'm sticking with 4 of my 5 starters, and then I'm bringing in Jamal Murray. I think that's kind of why they let off the gas a little bit, because they themselves are gassed. And I could see it in the future, right? A game where we're talking about the Nuggets just being dead tired, looking dead tired at the end of a basketball game, and it costs them. You hope it's not a game 7 like it was last year. But inevitably, we're heading in that direction, that there will be a game like that. But that shouldn't be right now. That shouldn't be this series. You get a minimal contribution from somebody on your bench, and having your 2 best players play their best basketball, that should be enough to get through the first round, regardless of your opponent. If you're the Denver Nuggets. Like, if you're an 8 seed or a play-in team, it's a little bit different. But for a team that's at the level the Nuggets are, if their duo is as impactful, Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, as they have been in playoffs past, and you get just a little bit of a breather for both of those guys, that should be enough. But I don't think they've been able to really take a breath, and I don't think that Jamal Murray has been as impactful as he can be. Hopefully that's tonight, because you're down on the Avs. What happens if the Nuggets get pushed to the brink of elimination at home tonight? That game, 8 o'clock, right here on Extra Sports 1300. I'll take your thoughts on it, 719-247-1313. Coming up next, comedian Dusty Slay will be at the Pikes Peak Center on Saturday, but it'll be on this show next. It is Drive Time Sports, and I am Ryan Kaufman. My next guest will be rolling through Colorado Springs Saturday night on his tour, The Night Shift. Tickets available axs.com or the Pikes Peak Center box office, because that is where he is performing, is at the Pikes Peak Center. His Netflix stand-up special, Working Man, will hold you over until then. I would highly recommend the work of Dusty Slay, who joins me now. Dusty, great to have you back on, man. How you been?
We're having a good time. I'm pumped to be here, pumped to be coming back to Colorado Springs.
Well, we're pumped to have you back here. I mentioned the Netflix special. It's been, about a year since it came out?
A little over a year, but yeah, about a year, and it's good. It's done well for me, and I just recorded a new special, actually, and so if you come to the show in Colorado Springs, it's a whole other hour, plus even new stuff, even newer stuff, newer than newer.
That's awesome, and I would imagine in the world of a stand-up comedian that Netflix special is maybe some kind of a career bucket list thing. I mean, does it get you into the next level of being a stand-up comedian, getting that Netflix special?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's like these days, Netflix special is like the old HBO special, It's the thing that everybody wants. I mean, whether they tell you they want it or not is one thing, but that is the thing everybody wants. If I didn't get a Netflix, maybe I tell you, it's not that big of a deal, but it is.
Dusty Slay, my guy. I've always heard from comedians, and I guess people in the entertainment business as well, like when they don't have to do something during the day, when they don't have that day job to support what they're pursuing their passion, that's also kind of when they feel like, all right, I'm on good footing. When was the last time you had a day job?
Well, very exciting, but I have not had a day job since 2014.
Well, see, then you've been crushing it since 2014.
Yeah, I mean, what's exciting about that is at one point in my life, I just, I remember accepting that I would just be working. Because I used to complain about my job all the time. And then one day I said, you know what? I'm just going to be working for the rest of my life. This is what I'm going to be doing. So let's just accept it and work hard at this job and try to, excel at this job. And then one day, here I am, find myself, working still, but in a different way.
Yeah, and I understand that you've kind of had a lot of different jobs before you got this job, the job that you really wanted, being a stand-up comedian. What was the weirdest job that you had?
Well, I don't know what weirdest was, but I guess everyone thinks this is it. But I was a pesticide salesman to Lowe's and Home Depot. So fertilizer and pesticides for, 8 or 9 years. I did that. And I would say that's the weirdest in what you're actually doing. You're a sales rep. You go to the store and you talk about your products. You try to get the managers to buy it. It's not that weird. But the fact that there is this competition, I worked for a company called Spectracide. There's Scott. There was Bayer at the time before they merged. And we all battled it out in the store. We were in there knocking down each other's displays, shrink wrapping them, hiding them in the overhead. It was a war going on in there, and I was all about it.
I had no idea. This is like the Coke and Pepsi wars going on in the pesticide industry.
Yeah, I mean, you have no idea what's going on in your local Lowe's store. I mean, the war that's waging on the pesticide aisle, I mean, people have no idea. It's insane in there.
Yeah, illuminating. We have to keep an eye out and see what's going on. Ask, you know what, for the audience, go out, ask, go to a Lowe's or Home Depot and say, hey, when do you normally get your pesticide salesman coming by? And then just thank Dusty later for what you are about to experience the next time you go in there. Dusty Slay, my guest, he'll be at the Pikes Peak Center on Saturday. I saw that you took on, because I follow you on X, as all people should, at Dusty Slay. I noticed you took a interest in the astronauts, our brave astronauts like Katy Perry the other day.
Oh, yeah.
What'd you think about that whole thing?
Well, I'm a big fan of celebrities going to space. You know, I love that. I wish that, they would just leave them there. But no, I thought, I really think that whole thing is ridiculous. Like, I don't think they went to space. I think they just went real high and then they came back down. They were not wearing suits. So they're not astronauts. They weren't flying the thing. They just took a very fun ride. I mean, I wish I could be in the ship. I think that'd be fun to go that high. But Katy Perry, she's up there like she's on LSD or something. I mean, it's like she came back. She's kissing the ground. She's been gone for half an hour,
Or ketamine. Because I know that you are very familiar with the effects of such a substance.
Well, I am, and I enjoyed it more than LSD. And maybe it's because the hospital was giving it to me. But, yeah, I mean, I had surgery done, and I was in the hospital on ketamine. And I had dreams. I mean, I had wild dreams. I could close my eyes and have a wild dream and open them up and tell my wife. And my wife's like, your eyes were closed for like 30 seconds. I'm like, I don't know what's been happening, but I've been doing some time traveling. And there's some darkness coming.
Dusty Slay, my guest. We are having a good time with Dusty Slay, who will be at the Pikes Peak Center on Saturday. I noticed, and you appear on a lot of different podcasts. You co-host with Nate Bargatze on his podcast. But I noticed, this being a sports show, I wanted to try and talk to you about something sports related. I didn't realize that you had such a passionate opinion when it comes to youth sports, Dusty.
With youth sports, you said?
Youth sports, not a fan?
I don't know what. No, I'm okay. I mean, what did you hear? I mean, because who knows what I said?
Well, I look up, Dusty Slay, try to, hear some of the podcasts and stuff, and it comes up that Dusty Slay, if you go Dusty Slay in sports in the Google right now, it says, does Dusty hate amateur sports? Oh, I guess that's my fault. That's my fault. I said youth sports, and I was setting you up to hate on children, and I don't want you to do that.
Yeah.
Amateur sports, which I think is different.
I have a joke, and, which is pretty true. I say I used to play a lot of sports when I was a kid. I was never very good, but I did like to play. And my favorite sport to play was soccer. But my dad, I grew up in Alabama, and my dad really hated soccer. He really discouraged me playing soccer. My dad would rather me do drugs than play soccer. And that's what happened, But, knows what I've said, but I hate on a lot of things, especially when I'm in a podcast. I'm just trying to be funny, but I don't think I hate amateur sports. I maybe am not into it, and I did tell everyone that I'm a really good swimmer, and I think that I could beat, a lot of swimmers, and everybody's like, oh, you think you could beat a professional swimmer? And I'm like, yeah, some of them. And I think, and they're like, oh, Michael Phelps. And I'm like, no, not the greatest swimmer of all time, but I'm a very good swimmer. And, when I used to drink, I used to hang out at the pool at my apartment complex, and I would be drinking and smoking cigarettes out there, and I would challenge people to races, and then I would beat them. And I was overweight and smoking, and people were mad about it.
As I would imagine they would be.
Yeah, I mean, these ripped guys get smoked by me at the pool. Oh, man, it was so good. I can't do long distance. I don't have the stamina, but I'm quick in I'm down there and back. I'm good in a pool.
Well, that's all we, when the Olympics, they swim those long distances, it's like you tune out halfway through. So really the sprinting in the pool is where it matters. Dusty Slay, my guest. I do want to, I want to ask you out of my own self-interest, So I have a son who's 12, and he wants to be a stand-up comedian. He's performed at his school talent shows the last couple of years, and he's kind of burning through a lot of specials. A lot of Nate's specials, your specials as well. I'm going to say Bert Kreischer for a little bit down the road. He needs to add a few years before he can watch Bert Kreischer. But I'm curious, for an aspiring young stand-up comic, what would be your advice to my son?
Well, at 12, it's hard to say, but I think you're on the right track. You just want to take some stuff in, see how people do it, listen to some of the classics. I always say you want to go back to the classics because those are the guys in the beginning kind of fine-tuning the craft. I think if you're listening to too many of the new people, then you're like, springboarding off of that. I think I like Steve Martin, Let's Get Small. I like that album a lot. I like Mitch Hedberg's Strategic Grill Locations. I think that one's great. I like Rodney Dangerfield, No Respect. I think those are good. George Carlin, Class Clown is a good one. Though, early Gary Goldman, that's the stuff I think you just got to take it in. You gotta watch all of that stuff. And then I don't know if this is still a thing anymore, but we used to tell street jokes. We just would go out, we would get a joke, and we would tell our friends at a party, and then other people would tell a joke. And I think that really helped me. I love to tell a street joke. And I think it helped me because I learned how to tell a joke. I learned how to deliver a joke. So when I started in stand-up, maybe my jokes weren't that good, but I really knew how to tell them.
And that's
I think that's
yeah.
Delivery's the key. You can have the best joke in the world, but if you can't tell it, then you're going to go nowhere with it. I know guys that have no good jokes, but are so funny because they know how to work it up there,
Yeah, he is working on his delivery a little bit. I had to tell him the other day, put your hand down. That's Dusty's thing. So he was trying to pick up on some of that stuff. Yeah.
I could only hope one day that there's a bunch of new comics hitting the open mic scene and they're all waving. I mean, that's my dream.
Yeah.
That we're all just waving out here saying we're having a good time. Another one, I don't know. You guys are not in the South, so you may not like it as much, but Jerry Clower and James Gregory. Jerry Clower is a little more storytelling, and James Gregory is very funny. They're just two old Southern comics. They both pass now, but they're very good comics. Jerry Clower is real old school, but I think it would be good to listen to just to get a feel for some other stuff. And James Gregory's a really good, underrated comic.
Well, I'll pass this along, and he'll be, excited that I brought him up to you, and he'll be, of course, seeing you on Saturday, and then checking out he's consuming all the Dusty Slay content he can get his hands on. So this Saturday, Dusty is at the Pikes Peak Center. And also don't forget, the night before, he'll be in Denver at the Paramount Theater. So you have a couple of chances to see him this weekend. You could get your tickets AXS.com or here locally at the Pikes Peak Center box office for Saturday night show at 7. Follow Dusty on all the social media platforms at Dusty Slay, and make sure, again, if you have not already, check out his next Netflix special, Working Man. Dusty, this was a pleasure, man. Great to have you back here in Colorado Springs, and look forward to the next time you and I get a chat.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Dusty Slay, very funny comedian, joining me here on Drive Time Sports. I should have mentioned my son's name so I could play this back for him and say, hey, I asked Dusty Slay about advice for you, and throw in his name. See, that's what happens when you try to be selfish. What was it that Jim Murphy told us in hour number 1, the author of Inner Excellence, too self-centered, and that's a problem? See, I was being self-centered. I was worrying about myself. I wanted to get him giving my son advice. I botched it. But no, he's hilarious, and some of you have won tickets from me to the show. I hope you have a great time. You will, because that's his whole thing. We're having a good time. So 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we continue with the discussion about the Denver Broncos draft. An interesting little tidbit in the Athletic, or out of the Athletic today, which I think actually goes to prove both sides of the argument that we were having yesterday about the Broncos draft class. We'll get to it next here on Extra Sports 1300. Sports in general, so much of it is the beauty being in the eye of the beholder, right? And I think there's perhaps no part of sports that is more that way than a draft class. Right? Because we bring so many things into it, what we classify as a good draft. Is it our draft board? Is it the draft board we see Mel Kiper have? What are we looking for? Is it need? Is it best player available? All this kind of stuff. So that's why this discussion that we have in the days following the NFL draft is so subjective. Take, for instance, so yesterday, I think the heart of the discussion with the Denver Broncos was what they did rounds 2 through 7. I think a lot of people warmed up to the Jahdae Barron pick itself. But then you look at what happens round 2 through 7, it felt like a little bit of a shift. All of a sudden, now the Broncos aren't drafting the best player available. They're looking for very specific things in these players to add to their team. And because you didn't really play the draft board, if you need a running back, you didn't end up getting one of the top tier guys because you didn't make a move up in the second round. In fact, you moved back multiple times, and then you end up with RJ Harvey instead of the Travion Hendersons, Amarion Hamptons, even Quinshon Judkins, which didn't sit well with a lot of people. But then you have the other side that are just saying, essentially, to loosely quote Joel Embiid, trust the vision. Trust the Paytons. So there's a story today in The Athletic where Mike Silver is sitting in with the Jacksonville Jaguars during the draft. And there was one especially interesting excerpt from it because the Jags had their eyes on not only RJ Harvey, but Pat Bryant as well. Allow me to share. As the second round neared its latter stages, Cohen, being Liam Cohen, the head coach of the Jags, we all remember him saying Duval, right? Cohen became antsy and said, quote, let's just say F it and get him. Talking to Harvey, whereas James Gladstone, the general manager, told him to be patient. Then, later on, they wanted to get Illinois wide receiver Phil Bryant, a.k.a. Duval Pat, because he's a Jacksonville native. Not just because he's a Jacksonville native, but he just so happens to be a Jacksonville native. And Tony Baselli, who now has some kind of role with the team, was asked who took RJ Harvey, and somebody said the Denver Broncos, and he called them not a nice word. He's upset because the Denver Broncos took RJ Harvey. And many in Broncos country are taking this as, well, see, the Jaguars loved Pat Bryant and RJ Harvey, and they were upset when the Denver Broncos took them. So clearly, Sean Payton and George Payton didn't do too bad. Well, let's really look into this. First of all, and we don't have to really dive deep into this aspect of it, but the fact that it's the Jaguars who are the team that that people are pointing to, and I get that's the report. Mike Silver wasn't in with the Packers or the Ravens or anybody like that. I'm just saying, remember, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Young head coach, young general manager, but an organization that has not been held up as necessarily the gold standard when it comes to talent acquisition. But fine, look, it's another team. They're paid professionals to do what they do as well. It's another team saying at least it shows there was a market for RJ Harvey and for Pat Bryant. So if you're a proponent of what the Broncos did and you love what the Broncos did, then this is great. Because another team wanted those guys and the Broncos stole them. But notice the other context. Liam Cohen basically saying, F it, let's go get him, means he's not the best running back on the board at the time. But they just really like him and want to go get him. And Gladstone's basically telling him, like, oh, no one's going to take him. He's not the best running back on the board. We'll get him later. So essentially, and you could say the same thing with Pat Bryant, that he was taken before the Jags were ready to take him. What does that tell you? What I was saying yesterday about the Broncos, rounds 2 through 7, which is a stark contrast to what they were in round 1, they reached. That is exactly what that is saying. They didn't reach for players who shouldn't have been drafted. But it's the whole thing with the draft that you slot guys in order to maximize the talent that you bring in. And if the Jags rather are saying we can wait because this guy will fall a little bit later because he's not the best running back on the board. I don't want to make assumptions, but for me, it was Caleb Johnson at the time. That was the best running back on the board. And say what you will about the Pittsburgh Steelers when it comes to the quarterback position, they know running backs, and they got Caleb Johnson. But that is telling me that the Broncos reached. They reached for both of these players. So essentially, Mike Silver's reporting in The Athletic is proving both sides of the argument. Right? If you say that these players are good and other teams wanted them and the Broncos got them, you're right. But if you're on the other side of the conversation, which is where I reside, in saying that the Broncos reached and did not get the best talent available at that position at the time, guess what? You're right too. So what are we left with? The very same thing I was talking about yesterday. If you believe that the Denver Broncos are putting the finishing touches on a perennial contender in both the AFC West and the NFL at large, then you love these. But if you're someone that thinks, maybe just to be safe, I believe in what the Broncos did last year. I don't think it was completely fraudulent, but just to be sure, let's maximize the talent at every position. You love Jahdae Barron. You love that pick because they did not go for a corner that was, well, unless you throw in Will Johnson, but he has injury concerns. You love their first round pick because you're like, I don't care what position. I just want the Denver Broncos to acquire as much talent as possible. So it's really what you're left with. And the overall theme of the Broncos draft in its totality is we're putting the finishing touches on this thing. We need specifically this. And specifically that, not even a position. They're getting more granular than that. They weren't looking for just a running back. They were looking for one with RJ Harvey's specific traits because they want that kind of a back. Same with Pat Bryant. They weren't just looking for the best receiver. They were looking for somebody with Pat Bryant's skill set. And also a wide receiver that reminded Sean Payton of another wide receiver that he coached in New Orleans, because that is also a prevailing theme of this Broncos draft, is that you have to remind Sean Payton of one of his players. If you remind Sean Payton of Barry Sanders as a running back, not going to cut it. Not going to cut it because he wants you to remind him of one of his running backs. Which, again, I talked about this yesterday. Like, it is a nice change of pace to have a head coach of the Denver Broncos that actually knows what he wants. I don't think that the draft was all bad. Far from it. And I think it's a refreshing change of pace to have a coach that knows what he's doing, because that hasn't always been the case with the Denver Broncos head coach, but B, has a specific vision. And ultimately, you just got to say, is the vision right? Because Sean Payton is making draft picks because he thinks that it's inches that they are away from winning the AFC West, if not accomplishing a much larger goal. And that's why, people love the New York Giants draft, because they just got really good players, because they need a lot of things. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think this Athletic article is a perfect example of this. I don't know that anybody was arguing necessarily that RJ Harvey is terrible or that Pat Bryant is terrible. I mean, some on the outer reaches of Twitter, maybe. But like, I see RJ Harvey. I watched him when he played CU. He's a good player. He just wasn't the best running back on the board. And that's all I was saying. The Broncos reached at multiple junctures. And I don't think that is the best idea for a team that I think still could really use upgrades at the skill positions. But if you think all is not lost with Audric Estime, if you believe in Devon Vele and Troy Franklin, because that's what Sean Payton has been telling you, that these guys, be patient with them. He's being patient with them. He thinks that they're going to be consistent contributors to him. That's where it all starts. We all thought that the Broncos needed to add to the skill positions, but in how much of a significant way? And if you think that they needed more significant upgrades, then RJ Harvey and Pat Bryant aren't really doing it for you. And that's where I'm kind of at here. I will tell you, though, what I do like that the Broncos did. I actually like what they did on the defensive side of the football. I mean, Vance Joseph has got to be thrilled with the way that the draft went. And I don't even think he was in the room. Q Robinson out of Alabama. I think that guy can contribute. And that's where George Payton has shown to be a very good drafter, right? Nick Bonito, Drew Sanders, Jonathan Cooper. The talent that George Payton has proven so far that he has an eye for is on the defensive side, and specifically with guys that go after the quarterback. So if you cut up the draft into like a few different portions and go offense and defense, I really like what the Broncos did defensively. Heck, I even like what they did at special teams. I'm not knocking them for taking a punter. Do it. How many punters has this organization had? I wouldn't grade the Broncos draft that highly on the offensive side because I believe that they reached for both of those players because of specific traits, and that's how I grade the draft. That's how a lot of people grade the draft, and it's why the Broncos lag behind a lot of teams in all these draft grades. But if Sean Payton utilizes them in his offense to their strengths, putting them in the best position to succeed, which is the bigger portion of this, fantasy owners are clamoring for RJ Harvey, apparently. I'm looking at all these rankings, and RJ Harvey's high up there. I got to see it on the offensive side. Defensive side, really like what the Broncos did. And if we're being really honest about it, and maybe this is a little bit of a nod to what Sean Payton's doing, it was the defense that got more exposed towards the end of the season than the offense. But I could argue that they needed some upgrades on both sides of the football. Take your thoughts if you didn't have a chance yesterday to give your thoughts on the Broncos draft. 719-247-1313. The three stories that are driving the show coming up next. Hello there. Welcome in. Drive Time Sports on this Tuesday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Pleasure to have you, whether you're listening on air, online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app, or whether you're watching the show on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300. If you'd like to be a more active participant in your listening today, you can always text or call in your thoughts at 719-247-1313 or send them to me via X. I am at Gingerly Tweets. Let's get things rolling here in the third hour of the show with what's driving the show. All right, story number one, a complete 180 from Game 4 for the Colorado Avalanche.
Rantanen back down low, they score. Wyatt Johnston again. I don't know how Taves didn't have a stick, but he didn't. Stars score in the power play, and the lead is back to 2 with 3:12 to go in period 2. Wyatt Johnston had been completely unnoticeable in this series, and now he has 3 points tonight, 2 goals and an assist.
Connor McGahee not salty about it on the Altitude Sports Radio Network, as heard here on Extra Sports 1300. If you subscribe to the idea that momentum carries over from one game to the next, last night was a tough day for you. Because it could not have been more different for the Colorado Avalanche from Game 4 to Game 5. Game 4, they looked like a wagon and looked unstoppable. Last night, they looked like they were severely overmatched by a team, mind you, that is playing without 2 of its best players. Nothing went the way of the Colorado Avalanche last night. Yes, the officiating was terrible. Yes, there were some bad bounces, but the thing that I think cost the Avalanche the most was well within their control. They just didn't match Dallas and I'll say desperation level, because I think it's all encompassing. When you look a step slow, when your execution is a little bit off, when your energy seems to be a little bit low, I that's kind of what I chalk it up to. But the Avs weren't ready in a game that they needed as much as Dallas did. It's really hard to figure. I know Dallas is coming off of the loss, and the perception is, oh, their backs are against the wall. It's 2-2. That was an important game for both teams, and only one of them looked like they were ready for it last night. And I think Wyatt Johnston's first goal certainly knocked the Avs back on their heels a little bit, but I mean, it got out of hand early, and then the Avalanche got back to within 1, and then Sam Malinsky takes a penalty that you absolutely cannot take when your team has just banked 2 goals and gotten to within 1. Killed all the momentum there, because momentum does exist during a game, just not game 2 game. Mackenzie Blackwood wasn't nearly the player he had been in the previous games, but I want to go to something that Connor mentioned on that highlight there. One thing that the Dallas Stars had going for them more than anything else last night was that the remaining best players, not Jason Robertson, not Miro Heiskanen, because they're still hurt, but their other best players, their remaining best players, were their best players last night. Mikko Rantanen had his best game of the series. Wyatt Johnston certainly did. And I have to wonder, where were those guys for the Colorado Avalanche? Cale Makar today nominated for a Vezina Trophy. Didn't look like a Vezina finalist last night or throughout this series. How about Valerian Nichushkin? The guy that we all thought was so integral to the success of the Avalanche, on account that both times when he went AWOL the last couple of years, the Avalanche then immediately exited from the postseason. He was not good. Like, Dallas's best players were their best players last night. And I don't think you can say the same thing about the Colorado Avalanche. In a game, and I cannot stress this enough, they needed just as much as Dallas did. And it really is hard to figure when you zoom out a little bit and take this series on its whole. It really is a wonder why not wonder, because if you're watching the games, you kind of see it. But the conversation that you and I had going into the series about all the question marks being on really Dallas's side of the ledger, and now fast forward and the Avs are on the brink of elimination, and Dallas has yet to get Jason Robertson or Miro Heiskanen back. And through much of this series, Mikko Rantanen has not been a factor, and yet the Avs still find themselves down 3-2. It's really peculiar. And I look back at game 2, and I say that's the one that they're going to continue to kick themselves over. And if they lose this series, that's going to be the one that they're looking back on and say, we blew it right then and there. 20 minutes away from taking a 2-0 series lead in Dallas. Overwhelming the Dallas Stars. And then you pulled up. You let go of the rope. Dallas comes back, beats you in overtime. And you've had to go back and forth with them since. And now you're in a situation where, for the first time this series, you got to win back-to-back games. And you have no margin for error. It can turn that quickly, can it? Yesterday, we're talking about how great the Avs looked, what's possible beyond the Dallas Stars series, and you had every reason to think that way. Right? I mean, look at the way they played. And yet, each game gets more important as they go on. So you win game 4, great, and you look great doing it. Awesome. Game 5's way more important than game 4. And they just weren't up to the challenge last night. And now they have to win at Ball Arena and keep their season alive just to get it back to Dallas for a game 7. Hopefully the Nuggets were watching last night and learned something. They're the subject of story number 2.
Difference of 2 seconds, the game clock and the shot clock.
Worst case scenario, we're going to overtime.
Jokic a screen, Murray to try to break the tie.
No timeout by the Lakers. I got to go.
James, a bump, a feed, a punch shot. No! Zeros on the clock. The Nuggets advance.
That is TNT on the call. Why am I playing a highlight from last year's Lakers series? Because, good question, by the way. It's because 1 year ago today, Jamal Murray hit the shot that ultimately eliminated the Los Angeles Lakers. And if you recall, in the fourth quarter of that game, he also posterized LeBron and hit a go-ahead 3 before he eventually hit the game-winning jumper with 4 seconds to go. I think that's the number one thing that the Nuggets need tonight in order to win Game 5 and take control of this series and push the Clippers to the brink of elimination. They need impactful bucket Jamal Murray. So many times when Jamal Murray's performed in the postseason, it's not so much that he put up 25 or 30 or 35. it's the individual shots that you remember that ultimately changed the course of a game, swung momentum back the Nuggets' way, put a game away, won the game at the buzzer. I think that they need some of that shot making. And they got it from other places in game 4, right? Aaron Gordon's dunk, possession before it, Nikola Jokic with the turnaround. They've got Russell Westbrook in game 1 to hit one of those kinds of shots. So it's not like it's been missing from the Denver Nuggets this whole time, but it's been missing from Jamal Murray. In fact, his 2 most prolific and efficient scoring games of the series, the Nuggets have lost. I don't know that the best part of playoff Jamal has arrived in this series yet. And tonight would be perfect timing for him to arrive. Because this is a massive game, and the winner, I know the number, they said it on ESPN, 80% of the time, the team that wins game 5 of a series that is tied at 2 goes on to win the series. That's the math that the Avalanche are fighting. And what makes last night even more disappointing is because going down 3-2, 8 out of every 10 times you do that, you're going to lose the series. And shouldn't the Avalanche have responded with more urgency, more desperation, better execution? I got to imagine in the NBA, it's about the same number. Sure, we had the Cavs rallying from 3-1 down. We've had the Nuggets rally from 3-1 down multiple times in one postseason. But NBA history is long. My guess is, I'll look it up during the break, but my guess is it's probably around 80%, if not greater. Most important game of the season, throw out all the cliches. They all apply. You need your best players, and you need the best version of your best players. See if the Nuggets get that tonight, courtesy of Jamal Murray. I guess I made mention of the third story in my first story, and that is that Cale Makar has indeed been named a Norris Trophy finalist, the trophy given to the best defenseman in the NHL, although they have a more verbose, eloquent way to put it, but it's basically the best defenseman in the NHL. For the 5th time in his 6-year career, he has been a finalist, at least one of the 3 best defensemen in the league. And no other defenseman has been nominated or been named a finalist. I gotta stop saying nominated, because technically every defenseman is nominated, just who gets voted for. No other defenseman now has the kind of streak going that Cale Makar does. And that's why, whether he wins the award or not, and I think that he will, but he is proven to be the standard to which all other defensemen in today's NHL are measured against. We don't have to, we'll have the historical argument when Cale Makar wins this thing, because that's the next step, right? But as far as the modern NHL, what they ask defensemen to do, what is valued from defensemen, yeah, you got to play defense still, but really want you to produce. And that's evidenced by the 3 players that are finalists for the Norris Trophy. Cale Makar, who had one of the best statistical seasons we've ever seen from a defenseman. Quinn Hughes, very good offensive defenseman. And Zach Werenski, who led his team in points. That's the way we view the Norris Trophy in today's NHL. And Cale Makar is the standard bearer for that, the standard bearer of excellence when it comes to defensemen in today's NHL. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. I did not expect to have this next topic on the docket at this point, but it's just been talked about so much today after the terrible loss by the Avalanche last night. Certainly Josh Kroenke would not want to add also hockey coach to the number of jobs he has to fill this summer, would he? For the first time in club history, Switchbacks FC will be hosting an MLS club as New York Red Bulls visit Widener Field in the U.S. Open Cup round of 32 coming up on Tuesday, May 6th, 7:30 p.m. Be a part of history at switchbacksfc.com. I think certainly, and it's not an unfamiliar topic of conversation when the Avs have bowed out of the postseason to wonder about Jared Bednar's future. But I think there is a couple of events that have happened recently that bring it back into light. Well, three, actually. You have what Josh Kroenke did with the Nuggets. Okay, so Josh Kroenke, the infinitely patient, maybe set it and forget it, the perception out there, like he kind of hire Michael Malone. He was one of the longest tenured coaches in the NBA, let him do his thing, and now suddenly he's gone, and Josh Kroenke admitted that maybe he was a little too hands-off. Maybe more with Calvin Booth, but still that time he was a little too hands-off by his own admission. So you have Michael Malone getting fired, and then in the NHL, yesterday you had Mike Sullivan, the longtime head coach of the Penguins, one of the few coaches that actually was longer tenured than Jared Bednar, that got the axe, leaving just John Cooper of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who, by the way, like, man, his team's got been getting such a raw deal. A lot of their games have led into the Avs games. You see that last night, the non-call, and now the NHL just sent me and obviously other media members a release saying that they suspended Ekblad for that hit last night. Not called a penalty, but a suspension. Man, and I really like John Cooper. Even when the Lightning and Avs were going at it in the Stanley Cup final, all the too many men on the ice stuff, I may disagree with John Cooper on occasion, but he's one of my favorite coaches in all of sports. So, but when you have a long tenured head coach in your own city that gets canned, and then you have one of the only coaches longer tenured than you that gets canned, and the kindling, well, that's the kindling, the gasoline on the fire is last night's game. And now the conversation is being had all over the place of whether the Colorado Avalanche, if they do not make it out of this round, will look to fire Jared Bednar. Well, not look to, though they will fire him. And when it comes to firing coaches, and I think this is especially true with a more patient, more level-headed ownership group that the Nuggets have. We're not talking about Vivek Ranadive with the Sacramento Kings, after all. We're talking about a little bit more patient, a little bit more level-headed. They did stick through with Michael Malone after they had lost Game 82 a few years back, a lot of years back, against the Minnesota Timberwolves. But especially with that kind of ownership group, it's very much how you lose, not the fact that you lose. I think that's what has been a staple of the Kroenke enterprise when it comes to, I think, players, but also coaches, general managers. I don't want to say losing is acceptable, but they're willing to push through the disappointment of simply losing and stick with continuity, believing that their continuity and their own decisions, by the way, that since they decided to hire these people, will eventually win out. But the thing with Michael Malone, it really wasn't that he was simply losing. Right? Nuggets were a top 4 seed in the West for most of the year. It wasn't that they were losing. It's how they were losing. They were losing while behind the scenes, Michael Malone and Calvin Booth were, depending on whose reporting you believe, were fighting like children. And it just became too toxic of an environment. Well, with Jared Bednar, there's none of that stuff going on, certainly. But it goes back to the point I made earlier. When you look at this series as a whole, not just last night, because games like last night, as disappointing as it is, they can happen, right? Nuggets just had one a couple of nights ago. They got absolutely obliterated by the Clippers. In a 7-game series, those kind of games will happen. But you zoom out and look at the series in its totality, and you're saying, really, looking at these two teams, how were the Avalanche down 3-2? You even look at a game-to-game basis. How are the Avalanche down 3-2? And if they end up losing this series, if they go from the highest of highs after Game 4 with the Gabriel Landeskog goal and just dominating the Dallas Stars to boom, boom, 2 losses and they're done, that is a bad way to lose. That's not just the Avalanche losing, because we can all acknowledge that this series should not be played in this round. But it's been that way for a long time, and it is the circumstances. But when you really dig into it, let's just say, to make it as much apples to apples as we can get, let's say the Nuggets lose tonight. Who would you be more surprised is trailing 3-2? Immediately, you would say the Avs. You're more surprised. In the last couple of years, especially 2 years ago with Seattle, you could argue that those kind of playoff exits, losing at that stage, could be a fireable offense in many people's minds. But there was the Valeri Nichushkin of it all that I think it was, well, not Jared Bednar's fault. And I think that's the right way to think. I don't think it was his fault. But now you have this series, you have Valeri Nichushkin. Your opponent, more importantly, is missing its 2 best players, and you find yourself down 3-2 with all the other circumstances of Mike Sullivan getting axed in Pittsburgh and Michael Malone going down. I think at least more than the last, 3 years? Lose to Dallas last year, lose to Seattle the year before, and win the Stanley Cup. Yeah, those last 3 years, you wouldn't even ask it when they won the Stanley Cup, obviously. Certainly, I think the question is more valid than it has been in years past on whether they would move on from Jared Bednar. And I'll say this. I don't think the reason why the Avs are down 3-2 is on Jared Bednar. I really don't. I don't buy into this perception that Pete DeBoer is running circles around him. I think the one mistake that Jared Bednar has made in this series is not playing Gabriel Landeskog sooner. It's game 2. He goes through the warm-ups. You see what he has become in this series. I think it was a mistake for Jared Bednar not to just say, you know what, Gabe, if you're good enough to warm up, you're good enough to play in the game. And then how different would this series be? We can debate that, the hypothetical, all day long. But that's the one tactical or lineup decision that I don't think that Jared Bednar got right, but you got to look at everything else. Right? He's done everything except scratch Jonathan Drouin. He's got nothing out of him. He's changed up the power play. He's responded to every game. I don't see anything from Pete DeBoer that is a more proactive approach. I think, especially last night, I think it was almost all on the players. Said earlier that their best players were the best players last night, and the Avs' best players weren't. I don't think that Jared Bednar, and we'll see what happens in Game 6 and maybe Game 7. Perhaps there are some coaching decisions that you question. But right now, if the series were to have ended last night, I would put hardly any of the blame on Jared Bednar outside of that little thing with Gabriel Landeskog. And I think the other part that, which makes me think that Jared Bednar is not going to get let go, even if the Avs lose this series, let's not forget what the biggest question was about this team. They completely reimagined the team on the fly in the middle of the season. They changed out the entire goalie room. They traded one of their most important players in their franchise's history in the middle of a season. And then they went out and made more acquisitions. I said going into this series, if they lose, I think it's more of an indictment on Chris McFarland than it is Jared Bednar. And I don't think Chris McFarland would be fired. I think part of what played into the Nuggets thing is they were just stuck. This team has, you really look at it, this team has done very little but lose talented players year over year. And at the trade deadline, when the Nuggets could have certainly used a shakeup to the roster similar to what the Avalanche did, they did nothing. Now, I don't want to get too far into the general manager portion of this, but my point is, I thought after all these moves that there was a decent chance that it would not happen for the Avs this year, but next year would be very important. And I think I'll answer the question of will the Avs fire Jared Bednar with a no but. I would say no, even if they fall in this series, they won't fire Jared Bednar, but next year becomes the year. And we'll set expectations when we get there. But if Jared Bednar falls short of that, if it's another first-round exit next year when you have Brock Nelson for a full year, Marty Necas for a full year, Drury and Mackenzie Blackwood and all that kind of stuff, and you bow out because that's going to be a really good team. That's going to be a President's Trophy caliber team next year. If they get bounced in the first round, then I think really there will be that conversation. Even if they lose on Thursday, I don't think that Jared Bednar gets let go. And if nothing else, Josh Kroenke doesn't strike me as somebody that wants that much tumult in his organizations in one offseason. But I don't think that will be the reason why he doesn't fire Jared Bednar. I just think that maybe helps a little bit. I think he's focused on the Nuggets this offseason, and then if things don't live up to expectation next year, then maybe the Avs are due for some changes. I'll take your thoughts on it. 719-247-1313. Could you see Jared Bednar getting fired if the Avs end up losing this series? Take your thoughts on that and whatever else may cross your mind on this Tuesday. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Couple of notes for tonight's Nuggets-Clippers game, Game 5. You could hear it here at 8 o'clock on Extra Sports 1300. Michael Porter Jr. not going to be suspended because apparently he did not come off the bench far enough to satisfy the rules for suspension. So he is available, bad shoulder and all. And Russell Westbrook, seen going through his warm-ups, which means very little. But that's the latest piece of Russell Westbrook intel leading up to tonight. I mean, the guy gets someone on the bench to at least chip him for a couple minutes. It's not that much to ask. Not even talking when Nikola Jokic is off the floor. I'm just saying one guy coming in, whether it's Russell Westbrook or Peyton Watson, just somebody coming in and giving a couple of solid minutes. Shouldn't be that much to ask, even for this bench unit. And the most likely guy to do that would be Russell Westbrook, honestly. So see if he plays tonight. Nuggets need it. Need big buckets from Jamal Murray. Significant buckets. Momentum-changing buckets from Jamal Murray tonight if they're going to win and not put themselves in the same situation that the Avs are in. A couple of your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Steve says, not looking good for the Avs. Never say never, though. And I'm with you on that. Right? 80% of the time, the winner of Game 5 in a 2-2 series wins the series. Don't love that. Certainly have to acknowledge that history and math is not in the Avalanche favor. But you look at the way this series has gone, the Avs have been the better team for most of it. So if that continues to hold out, at least we get a Game 7, and then Game 7's, who knows what happens. Goofy stuff can happen in a Game 7. I'll tell you the thing, it wasn't necessarily last night's game that would have bummed me out if I was an Avs fan. It was what Jared Bednar said about Cale Makar and his key players.
I think he had a little bit of a rough start to the series, but he was absolutely outstanding at home. So, yeah, and we've had a few guys that have struggled in this building and played good at home. That's a bright spot going back to our building.
Yeah, for Game 6. You got to come back to Dallas for Game 7. Got to get that part figured out. American Airlines Arena or Center. I don't know. Arena, Center. There's one in Miami and there's one in Dallas. I don't know. It's American Airlines on both of them. But that's a Saturday problem, right? Get it to a Game 7 and then all bets are off, right? And look, I would have more faith in the Avalanche forcing a Game 7 than I would the Nuggets if they lose tonight. For whatever's that's worth, which is not much. Yep, I'm telling you though, Game 2. Game 2 is going to be the one, not last night. That's going to be the one that bothers you. From the 719, very short, sweet, to the point, Rockies suck. Yes, you are correct in that. Just here's your daily Rockies update. Essentially what the texter just said. But here's the thing. And this was a conversation that, I have buddies who are White Sox fans last year. And I say last year, not just because last year the White Sox were going through something similar, but also because that is the year where their fandom of the White Sox ended. if you're going to be this bad, be historic, right? Be notable. Be the answer to a freaking trivia question. Be that level of bad, right? It's almost like the same thing with the NBA. Either go for a title or tank. Don't be caught in the middle. Do something significant. Win the whole thing or win Cooper Flag or insert number one prospect on a year-to-year basis here. The thing about the Rockies right now through 28 games, they have 4 wins. 4. That is an insanely low number. I can't even comprehend, even through 28 games, a team only winning 4. But you know what's crazy about the whole thing? That's not even the worst 28 game start in MLB history. That belongs to the 03 Tigers. You remember the 03 Tigers with they had that first baseman was on the team, and then I believe they had a right fielder in a couple of pitchers, at least a couple of pitchers. I do remember the uniforms they wore. No, wasn't that Bonderman? Wasn't he in the rotation? Wasn't that went before Carlos Pena was good? Wasn't he on the Tigers? Maybe not. I don't know. I don't remember him. You know why? Because they didn't end up where the Cleveland Spiders ended up. The Cleveland Spiders are the standard bearer for suctitude in Major League history. So the fact that the Tigers started, 3-25, it's lost in MLB history. Nobody cares. So that's the thing about the Rockies. Allow me to pile on. They are so incredibly bad. They are the worst team in Major League Baseball right now. But yet, they're not even so bad to be historic. They're not even off to the worst start. And I just say, stop being in the middle, Dick Monfort. Like, be historic. Because, look, people are going to find every reason that they could possibly find to go watch a Rockies game. This would actually be one of the more compelling reasons to go to a Rockies game this summer. The fact that they are chasing history. I want my children to witness this. Say, boys, look at those guys out there. They are about to become the worst team in the history of baseball. And baseball is old as hell. That's a memory to create with your sons if you're a father. You're seeing something we've never seen in baseball history before, up close and personal. Can't even do that. They won one too many games. They're not even having the worst start through 28 games, but they are so bad. They are so bad. It is like, and I've been saying that the Rockies should be like this. They should try to be like this. I do not shame teams for tanking. I don't. I think it is a viable way to build back up your organization. I am all for tanking. And now we're here, and I'm like, oh, this is so bad. This is what Astros fans sat through for years. Oh, it's so much worse. I can't even imagine. We're so far removed. I mean, the Avalanche before they got Nathan McKinnon, I mean, that feels like ancient history. I can't even remember. What, they win 19 games that year? I can't even remember that. The Avalanche or the Nuggets the year before they got Carmelo. They weren't even the worst team in the league. They were tied for the worst record in the league. I can't even this is the route they need to go. This is what needs to happen, except they have been so bad, but not historically bad, but they have been so bad that anti-tanking rules, they don't even get the first pick in the draft. They don't have the best odds for the first pick in the draft. They have sucked for too long that they're not allowed to have the gifts given to the worst of the worst. They got picked like 11th or something. Oh, they can't even be terrible right. But you're all right. Rockies do suck. They are not a good baseball team. Not good at all. On that happy note, onward and upward. Nuggets Clippers 8:00 tonight. If you are interested, listening, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Got a couple guests lined up as well. Talk Stars, Avs, and all that good stuff. So enjoy your evening. Appreciate the interaction. Thanks to Jim Murphy. Pick up the book, Inner Excellence. AJ Brown was onto something. It's terrific. And then thanks to comedian Dusty Slay. Go check him out Saturday at the Pikes Peak Center, 7:00, AXS.com, or at the Pikes Peak Center box office to get your tickets. Talk to you mañana.